International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19. This one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, due to be played in January 2024. This episode is looking at the players of India. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 19 on the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, played in 2024. This episode covers India's players. We are doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We think we went into too much detail in previous player mediacasts we've done. So in this series, we're aiming for a lighter, more listener-friendly version. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. We think that'll be in late December, and at that time we'll go back over our list and see who made it and who didn't. We'll also cover a couple of other things, which I'll go into a bit more detail at the end of this podcast. We have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see the link to that on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, though, we're focused on the Asian and African Cups, both of those taking place in early 2024. And we have also started coverage of World Cup 2026 qualifying. So this episode will have 3 sections. Section 1, where we give some general information on the team and discuss it. Section 2 is the main part. We look at the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of making the final squad. And then a short section 3 where we give any closing thoughts and preview part 2 in more detail. All right, let's begin then, and we begin with some general information about the squad. So observations about the squad is that India's squad is very stable. And what I mean by that is there seems to be pretty much a clear starter for every position, and sometimes even a clear backup for each position. Players seem to stay in their roles, whether it be a starter, a substitute, or even when they're off the team, they tend to be off for a long time or for good. So fairly consistent in their player selection. The other observation is they are still fairly reliant on Sunil Chhetri, their star player, for goals. So he still gets most of their goals. They did have another scorer during the 2019 Asian Cup. That was JJ Lalpakloa. He had a high scoring ratio, but he did retire after that tournament. None of the current attackers other than Chhetri have impressive goal records. The next best candidates have 7 goals in 30 games and another with 6 goals in 34 games, of course, much lower than Chhetri or even Lalpakloa's scoring record. I gotta say that is a difficult name to say, and we actually begin with that name in the retirement section. Really, the only significant retirement that I want to talk about is JJ Lalpakloa, and he was with the team from 2010 to 2019. He had 61 caps and 24 goals. He's actually only 32 years old at this time, so retired from the team quite young. And he was in the Asian Cup in 2019, actually a substitute. He subbed into all 3 games, but in 2 of those games it was at halftime. And he had scored 6 of their 18 goals in qualifying. So yes, they're losing a forward there, and really more to the point, haven't really replaced him. Okay, let's move on to look at Indian Players Club affiliations. So actually all of them play for domestic clubs. So the Indian League was actually looking quite good about 10 years ago. It was kind of growing in stature, but I think in the last few years it has kind of dropped off. It's still a healthy domestic league, and the teams still attract a few foreign players from soccer nations like Spain, Australia, or Africa. But none of the Indian teams have made much of an impact in the AFC Club Champions League. That's like the Championship League in Europe for the Asian teams. So an Indian team is rare even at the group stage in that competition, and they've never had a team that made the round of 16 there. Okay, well, we'll just kind of talk about a couple of the bigger clubs that the players are coming from, and I limit myself to 3 here, although, you know, we could list probably 10 clubs here, but Mohun Bagan is probably the biggest club there, and Bengaluru, also several players coming from that club, and the third one is Mumbai City. So there are, as I said, other clubs that players come from, but these seem to be the biggest ones, at least at this time. At this time, I would tell you any players playing outside of the country, or players playing for some bigger names, say in Europe or around Asia. But as I said, none of them play outside the country. So we move on to their recent games. And the general pattern of their recent games is that in mid 2022, in June of 2022, they completed their Asian Cup qualifiers to get them to this tournament. And since then, have had friendlies, mostly in the form of friendly tournaments, I must say. And in June of 2023, there was the South Asian Football Federation Cup, or the SAF Championship. So we'll just kind of go over it quickly. Their friendlies in 2022, or early part of 2022, they had 2 in March and 1 in May. And the reason I'm doing this is because these are the games we'll be looking at, the participation of the players. When we talk about their participation, it'll be over the last 2 years. So just to give you an idea of what the games, what games we're talking about. Okay, so 3 friendlies there, and then we have the Asian Cup 2023 qualifiers. That was 3 games in June against Cambodia, Afghanistan, and Hong Kong. And then we had more friendlies. It was actually a friendly tournament in Vietnam in September, and 2 games there against Singapore and Vietnam. And then in 2023, they had some friendlies, 2 friendlies in March. I don't think that was a tournament. Anyway, Myanmar and Kyrgyzstan were the teams they played there. And then they did host a friendly cup. In fact, they hosted 2 cups in June of 2023, so they were quite busy there. The first one was called the Intercontinental Cup, but really it's just a friendly cup. They were hosts of it. That was from June 9th to 18th of that month. 4 games there. Mongolia, Vanuatu, that's in the Oceanic region, and Lebanon, and then they ended up meeting Lebanon in the final again. So 2 games with Lebanon, and in fact, more to come. They've met Lebanon several times over the 2023. The next one was immediately after. It was the South Asian Football Federation. So that region with India and Sri Lanka, Pakistan, all the countries in that area. That was from June 21st to July 4th. And there were 5 games there. Pakistan, Nepal, Kuwait, Lebanon, and Kuwait again. So they invited a couple of tougher teams. I actually kind of suspect that they invited a couple of tougher teams, maybe in preparation for this competition. because those teams were much stronger than the teams in that region. Um, in truth, so they kind of dominated the competition. Anyway, 5 games in the SAF Cup, again meeting Lebanon there. They had the friendly cup. This one was hosted by Thailand. That's the King's Cup in Thailand. That was in September. And there they met Iraq, Lebanon, and Kuwait again. So those teams meeting pretty regularly. And then they finished with just a single friendly in October of this year. We're doing this mediacast at the end of October. So this was earlier this month. And it was a friendly in Malaysia. Okay, and we're going to talk in not too much detail about the formations that they used, looking over the formations of those cup. And all we'll really say is that their usual formation, their usual formation that they often used was a 4-2-3-1. So 4 at the back, 2 lines of midfielders with defensive and attacking midfielders, and then 1 forward. From time to time, but actually quite rarely, they used a 4-4-2 or a variation of the 4-4-2, which was like a 4-2-2-2. So 2 lines of midfield there as well. And then also sometimes, but quite rarely, a 4-3-3. However, recently they changed this up in the 2 games in September. There they used for the first time a 4-1-4-1 formation. So twice using that one. And then in their last game in October there against Malaysia, 4-4-2 formation. So changing things up, experimenting a little bit right at the end there. So hard to say what they're going to do. We could go into a deep analysis about what formations they used against which teams. You know, if it was a tough team, they used this, or a weak team, they used that. But I think rather we'll talk about the key points here. And the key point is 4 at the back. No matter what formation they used, there were 4 at the back. I'll just, put this in pattern. 4 at the back, and then it varied as to how many forwards they had, but really it tended to be 1 forward. Sorry, I didn't prepare the notes for this, so I'm actually writing it. 1 forward usually. And, you know, that may be harking back to their kind of their lack of scoring prowess, where, you know, Chetri is that forward, but there aren't many other good forwards for them to put on the field. Okay, so when we go through the players, we'll be talking about 2 central defenders, a right back and a left back at the back, and we won't go into detail on the midfield there, but the usual set of defensive and central midfielders probably interchanging quite freely. Not many left and right midfielders in terms of defensive line midfielders, but wingers or attacking midfielders on the left and on the right, and then usually just 1 forward. Okay, let's look at their upcoming games. And in November, they have an important set of games coming up. Their first 2026 World Cup qualifiers. So that actually began in the Asian region in October with a preliminary round. And we actually did previews for those little known weak teams. It was quite interesting because we rarely get to see rarely get to learn much about those teams. Those who won it graduate to the round 2, which is a group stage, and that's what begins in November. India received a bye in the preliminary round. So on November 15th, they face Kuwait away. We saw that they met Kuwait a couple of times in 2023, and they face Qatar at home. So those are 2 fairly challenging games then. and we think they should be using their best players for this game. And finally, as of yet, they have not scheduled any pre-tournament friendlies, but probably will schedule a game or two leading up to the tournament. But the November games, the World Cup qualifiers, will be very interesting to see. We're kind of expecting that they'll finalize some decisions on their squad for the Asian Cup. Maybe try out a couple of players that they're thinking of bringing to the Cup. But again, they kind of have to put their best on the field to win those games. So we don't think there'll be too much experimentation. All right, that's the end of section 1. And we move on to section 2 to start looking at the candidates for the squad. So we're going to begin with the manager. And we'll just talk a little bit about the manager who managed them through the 2019 Asian Cup. That was Stephen Constantine. He was an English manager. He resigned after the 2019 tournament, maybe under some pressure. They were a bit disappointed that they didn't pass the group stage. I considered that a bit of a lofty ambition. But after they won the first game 4-1, a smashing win over Thailand, it looked quite possible. But then they lost their 2 games after, and the third game was a 1-0 loss to Bahrain. They gave up a penalty in extra time in the final, which basically cost them the advancing spot. And Stephen Constantine resigned after. Stephen Constantine went on to manage Paphos in Cyprus and East Bengal, a fairly big team where some of these players come from, East Bengal in India, and then most recently became manager of the Pakistan national team in 2023. So Stephen Constantine out in 2019, and in was Igor Stimac. Igor Stimac, the manager since 2019. He also is managing the under-23 national team, or he did until recently, kind of bringing these players through. So Igor Stimac has never managed at a tournament before, but he has experience as both a player and as a manager. As a player, he was on the Croatian national team from 1990 to 2002 with 53 caps and 2 goals. So he was part of that 1998 World Cup squad that finished 3rd. As a manager, he has managed some pretty big clubs, actually. He managed Hajduk Split and Zagreb, both of those big clubs in Croatia. Sepahan, one of the bigger clubs in Iran. And he was also manager, though, for just a short time, of the Croatian national team in 2012 and 2013. He obviously didn't last long there and didn't take them to a tournament. And now he's the manager of the Indian national team since 2019. So Igor Stimac, the Croatian manager. Let's move on to goalkeepers, and we'll begin just by introducing the names and the likelihood, and then we'll talk about them a little bit to explain why we think what's going on and maybe create a bit of a narrative. So we begin with a definite candidate in Gurpreet Singh Sandhu. Gurpreet Singh Sandhu. We also have a likely candidate in Amrinder Singh. 2 possible candidates in Vishal Kaith and Gurmeet Singh. And finally, a possible but unlikely candidate in Furba Temba Lachenpa. Furba Tempa Lachenpa. Okay, let's go back and look at the who is probably the starter, Gurpreet Singh Sandhu. So he has been with the team since 2011, and he has 65 caps. He actually is one of the few players who did a stint outside of India. He played for Stabæk, a team in Norway, from 2014 to 2017. And he was on the Asian Cup way back in 2011, the Asian Cup squad, on the roster, but saw no action there. But in 2019, he was the starting keeper, starting and finishing all games. So he started 17 of their 22 games over the period we're looking at. That is January 2022 to October 2023. So to make things easier, I'm going to say over the past 2 years. Started 17 and was on the bench for 5 others. So we consider him a definite candidate and almost certainly the starter too. Amrinder Singh, the likely candidate, has been with the team since 2017 and has 12 caps. And he also was at the Asian Cup in 2019 as the backup keeper, but he didn't see any action. And those 5 games that Singh Sandhu missed, he played. So he got 5 of their 2022 games over the past 2 years and was on the bench for 15 of those and not selected for 2 matches. So he almost certainly coming to the Cup, but as the backup keeper, the first backup keeper. The next one is Vishal Kaith. So he has been on the team since 2018 and has just 4 caps. He also was the backup keeper, the 3rd string keeper at the Asian Cup in 2019. He didn't see any action there, but he was on the bench. But after that, he was off the team for 2 years. He returned from a 2-year absence in October, right at the end here, for their last game. And of course, he didn't start that game, but he was on the bench for it. So perhaps coming back into the picture, Vishal Kaith. The only thing that seems in doubt here is the 3rd string keeper. The other candidate is Gurmeet Singh. He doesn't have any caps for the national team. He's 24 years old, and he got his first appearance on the bench in June of this year, 2023. But they played a lot of games since then, 12 games. He didn't start any, but he was on the bench for 11 of them, and then not selected for the last match. That's the one that Vishal Kaith came back in for. And actually, we're going to take Berber Themba Lachempa off the list here because we're only going to do the main candidates. He just got his first appearance in March 2023 and was on the bench for 2 games, but hasn't appeared since. So unless it is a realistic possibility, we won't put them on the list here. But we will, of course, if they're we will in part 2 if they're named to the squad here. So let's just kind of go back and look at the narrative. It seems pretty clear that Gurpreet Singh Sandhu will be the starter and Amrinder Singh will be the backup. The only question here is whether the returning Vishal Kaith is coming back to be the backup keeper like he was in 2019, or whether Gurmeet Singh, who has been on the bench quite a bit more recently, is a new candidate. And I'll just quickly point out here that on the graphics, if the name is written in black script, it means they've been at a tournament before, and if it's in gray script, it means they haven't been to a tournament. Okay, let's move on to defenders, and we'll begin with central defenders here. So we have 2 definite candidates for central defender, and the first one is Sandesh Jingan, and the second is Mehtab Singh. We have 1 likely candidate in Anwar Ali or Anwar Anisa Ali, and then 1 possible candidate in Lalchung Nunga. Lalchung Nunga, just a single name there. And we also have 1 player who seems to be off the squad, Chingulsana Singh, but we won't put him on the list or speak of him more because he's been off the team for a while. So just 4 candidates as central defenders there, a bit surprisingly. But the first 2 are the regular starters. So Sandesh Jingan, kind of an iconic figure here. He's been with the team since 2015 and has 59 caps and even 5 goals. He actually did play for a team in Croatia, Sibinek, in 2020 and 21. Otherwise, he's been in India. He's a very beloved player in India and made a very good impression on me in the 2019 Asian Cup, especially in Game 3 against Bahrain, but kind of a distinct looking figure and a very hard worker on the field there. And Sandesh Jingan has started 18 of their 22 games over the past 2 years. He was on the bench for one and suspended on yellows for one other. Actually, that just adds up to 20, but I don't think we need to investigate it further. He is a regular starter for India. The other definite candidate is Mehtab Singh. So he got actually his first cap in March of 2023 and started 5 of their remaining 14 games. However, he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 5 others. So ever since being called up, he has been called up consistently. Not necessarily the definite starter that we think Sandesh Jingan will be, but a definite candidate for being named to the squad. So there we go, 9 caps since his first in 2023. He's 25 years old, and we think he will definitely be on the squad. Likely candidate, Anwar Ali, has been with India since 2022, and he has 18 caps and 1 goal. He's just 23 years old, and he got his first cap in March of 2022 and started 16 of the remaining 22 games over the past 2 years. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 3, but not selected for the last match. So basically, Mehtab Singh seems to be kind of taking over his position in recent times. Nevertheless, Ali is always selected, so honestly, probably a definite candidate to be named to the squad. I think we put it as likely just because he kind of seems to be losing the starting spot that he had for most of the 2 years building up to this. So to summarize with a bit of a narrative, it has so consistently been Jingan and Ali at the back, with Singh as the consistent backup, but maybe making a bid because he played the last match. But we'll say Jingan and Ali with Singh as the backup, but we're not even sure who the further backups are beyond Lal Chungnunga there. There are not many players coded as CDs, as you can see. Usually they bring 5 or 6 central defenders to a tournament, but we only have 4 names here. So maybe we'll see a new name or 2 when the squad comes out. But the fact is they haven't brought players to the games that they have been playing who are coded as central defenders. So my guess is that they are maybe relying on right backs and left backs in the case if they need a backup as for a central defender, which hasn't happened yet. But we did see one game where the right back Rahul Beke was called in as a central defender. So that's my guess that the other defenders will fill in the case that they need someone to. Okay, let's move on to right backs, and we have left backs, and it's very straightforward here. We have Akash Mishra as a definite candidate. We have Subhashish Bose or Bosey as not a likely, but a possible candidate. And we have Nairam Rosham Singh as also a possible candidate. We're going to see a bit later that he also plays on the right. Okay, let's go back over it. Akash Mishra has been with the team since 2021, but he has 23 caps. He's really carved out a position for himself, the 21-year-old. He got his first appearance in March of 2021 and started 18 of their 22 games over the last 2 years, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. So very consistently selected as the starter. And Akash Mishra, we imagine, will be not only named to the squad, but the starting left back. Subhashish Bose he was actually the starter in this position for the 2019 Asian Cup. He's been on the team since 2018 and has 34 caps. So it looks like Mishra has displaced him there, but he remains the backup. He started 5 of their 22 games over the past 2 years, and he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 8. However, he was not selected for 8 other matches, including the last 3. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on there. He always was a bit in and out of the team, but the non-selection for the last 3 matches, a bit of a concern, and forced us to put him down to the level of possible. Okay, and the other possible is Nerim Roshan Singh, and he's coded as a left back, but we should probably consider him a right back because when he has played, he has played more as a right back. He has been with the team since 2022 and has 9 caps. And in his case, what happened was he got his first cap in March of 2022, and he played 8 games, 5 of them as a starting right back, and 3 of them as a sub. And then he was off the team for 7 months, and that period spanned 11 games. And he came back for the most recent game in October 2023 and didn't start it, but subbed into it. Back in the team, and perhaps brought in to replace Bose, who's been off the team for the last 3 games. So all of that, though, is at the kind of the substitute or backup level. So in a summary of the left back position, it's very straightforward. It's Akash Mishra, and Bose has regularly been the backup, but perhaps is being challenged for the position by Nerim Roshan Singh. Okay, let's move on to right backs and introduce the candidates. So we have Nikhil Pujari as a likely candidate, pretty close to a definite there, actually. Pritam Kotal as a possible candidate. Rahul Beke as a possible also, and Ashish Ray as a possible candidate also. So 3 possible candidates. So let's begin with Nikhil Pujari. He's been with the team since 2017 and has 19 caps and 1 goal. He was off the team for a while, but returned after a 2.5-year absence in June 2023 to start 8 of their games, as well as subbing in for 3 and being on the bench for 1 other. So after his return in June 2023, he's been consistently called up and actually seems to be the starting right back there, although it's not as certain as Akash Mishra on the left side. The other candidates are Pritam Kotal, and he's been with the team since 2015 and has 52 caps. 52 caps and no goals. He was actually the starting right back in the 2019 Asian Cup there, so his position has kind of been usurped there. He's definitely a backup now. He did actually start 6 of the 22 games over the last 2 years. He was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 8. And not selected for 5, and he too was not selected for the last 3 matches. So he looked like a regular as a backup and sometimes starter, but now Pritam Kotal is maybe in danger of not making the squad because we don't know why he wasn't selected for the last 3 matches. So we'll have to see in his case in November whether he makes a return. The second possible candidate is Rahul Beke, and he has been with the team since 2019 and has 22 caps and 1 goal. But most of those caps came before the last couple of years. Over the last 2 years, he's only started 3 games and subbed in for 1. But he was on the bench for 9 and not selected for 9 others. He too, though, was not selected for the last 3 matches. So we saw that one of his 3 starts over the past 2 years has been as a central defender, and the other 2 as a right back. But his position may be under threat. We'll also have to check in November. The player brought in for the last 3 games to kind of replace the position is Ashish Rai, and he has only 1 cap for the national team, and he got it. Well, he first appeared on the bench in September 2022, actually, and started 1 of their remaining 3 games. Sorry, that should be September 2023, and started 1 of their remaining 3 games there, and was on the bench for 1 other. But he also wasn't selected for the last match, so we're not really sure who they were bringing in as a backup there, but it was Pujari who started that game. So Ashish Rai. So all 3 of those candidates with a bit of a claim to the position, probably Pritam Kotal the most likely of the 3. And maybe, as I say, these players are intended as backups for the centre-back position. But all 3 of them missed the last game. So it's definitely a less straightforward position than on the left side. And as we mentioned, it was actually the left defender, Nairem Roshan Singh, playing the position in the first part of 2022 for those Asian Cup qualifiers, in fact. And then Kotal started taking over, but he became a backup when Pujari arrived back from a 2.5-year absence. So now Pujari seems the starter in the position, but Kotal and Ray have had starts over the last little while. So a little less straightforward than on the left side. All right, it is time to move on to the midfield. And we're going to begin with defensive midfielders. So actually, defensive and central midfielders, there's not a lot of difference between them. But, you know, in order to kind of organize things, we'll just go according to their designated positions. So we have a definite candidate with Jigsan Singh, and a likely candidate with Rohit Kumar, and a possible candidate with Suresh Singh, and a player who is off the squad, Pranay Halder, last played in March 2022. We won't add him to the list, but bring him back if he is named to the squad. So let's look at these 3 players in a bit more detail. Jigsan Singh has been with the team since 2021 and has 19 caps. He's just 22 years old, so really inserting himself into the squad, playing 14, starting 14 of their 22 games over the past 2 years, as well as being subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3. He was injured for the last match, but is due back before the Cup. On January 1st, though, so it's a somewhat of a long-term injury. We'll update that in the part 2 of the podcast. So he became a regular starter, as you can see by his numbers, but he was injured for the last game. And he actually played as stopper in the recent 4-1-4-1 formation. So when they do have a defensive midfielder, he seems to be the one. Jigsan Singh, a definite candidate. Next, we have Rohit Kumar, a likely candidate. And Rohit Kumar has 11 caps, earning his first one just this year, actually, in 2023. 11 caps and 0 goals. He got his first appearance in March 2023 and started 3 of their remaining 14 games, as well as subbing in for 8 and on the bench for 3 others. So he's been called up without fail over the past year and is usually a substitute. So I really should have him as a definite candidate because our list is really for making the final squad, not for being a starter, but we'll leave him where he is for the time being. Likely candidate Rohit Kumar. And the possible candidate is Suresh Singh, and he has been with the team since 2021 with 20 caps and 1 goal. That's good. He's just 23 years old, and recently he started 5 of their 22 games over the past 2 years, was subbed in for 4, but not selected for 13 others. So he's kind of on and off the team. He was actually off the team for 9 games until returning for the last 3. So a bit uncertain. Suresh Singh, a possible candidate. And we mentioned the Prone Halter, seemingly off the squad. So we won't put him on the list. Now, we won't kind of summarize that section until we go through the central midfielders. So we have a definite candidate in Anirudh Thapa. And that's it. We have 2 possible but unlikely characters in Roland Borges. And Roland Borges, doesn't sound like an Indian name there. And also in Lalang Mawia Ralte. Both possible but unlikely. In fact, both of them made a brief appearance in June 2023, but haven't been called up since. So we'll leave them off the list. So we only have to look at Anirudh Thapa, the definite candidate, who's been with the squad since 2017 and has 51 caps and 4 goals. So quite a veteran, even at 25 years old. And he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and recently has started 17 of their 22 games, as well as subbing in for 2 and being on the bench for 3 others. So always called up. Wow, couldn't get a more definite candidate than that, and likely a starter too. So that brings us to the kind of the summary of the position. So basically it's always the defensive midfielder Jeetson Singh alongside Anirudh Thapa, with Suresh Singh in the mix in early 2022, but now Kumar seems the primary backup, but difficult for both of them to get on the field since Jeetson Singh and Thapa play start so often. Okay, next we have left midfielders, so that is more of a defensive position, and we don't have any candidates either coded as a left midfielder or right midfielder, apart from a player who now seems to be off the squad, Holacharan Narsari, who was with the squad but played his last game in March 2021, so well off the squad now. So we move on to talk about wingers and left attacking midfielders. So we're kind of combining these 2 positions, left wingers and left attacking midfielders. So imagine the kind of the top left quadrant of the field, depending on the formation, whether it's a winger or an attacking midfielder. Okay, and we have a definite candidate in Nauram Mahesh Singh. So we need to be careful not to mix him up with the left back Nauram Roshan Singh. This is Nauram Mahesh Singh, and he is a definite candidate. And we have a possible candidate in Nandhakumar Sekar. Nandhakumar Sekar, a possible candidate, and then 2 possible but unlikely candidates. So I'll just quickly mention their names. It's Bipin Singh and Ritwik Das, and just like the two possible but unlikely candidates we met before, they made a brief appearance in June 2023, but haven't appeared in any of the fall games. So we won't add them to the list. Let's go back and look at Nauram Mahesh Singh in a bit more detail. He's been with India. I'm not sure, actually. My notes say 2025, so I made a typing error there. He has, no, it's since 2023, because he got his first cap in March 2023 and has 13 caps and 3 goals, just 24 years old. And he got his first cap, as I said, in March 2023, has started 5 of their 14 games since his start, and was subbed in for 8 of them and on the bench for 1 other. So yet another player who has been called up without fail. Naura Mahesh Singh, a definite candidate. The other one is Nanda Kumar Sekar, and he had got his first cap in June 2023, started 1 of their remaining 12 games, and subbed in for the last one and was on the bench for 8 of them. So just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for. However, those were 2 of the last 3 matches, so we moved him down to possible kind of for that reason. So he's called up regularly as a sub, as we saw, has spent most of his time on the bench, and he would be a likely candidate except for missing 2 of the last 3. So let's summarize the role of left winger or left attacking midfielder. It seems quite unsettled in 2022 with various out of position players being used. But from his first cap in March 2023, Naura Mahesh Singh has shared it, not with the sub Sekar that we just introduced, but in fact with the forward Ashik Kurunian. Ashik Kurunian sometimes playing as a left attacking midfielder, even though he's coded as a forward, and we'll meet him shortly. Okay, so we'll probably expect to see one of those 2 players on the left upper quadrant. Let's move on over to the right side, to the right wingers. And we also have a definite candidate in Laliantuala Changti. Laliantuala Changti, definite candidate, and Udanta Singh, a likely candidate. And we also have a possible candidate in Rahul Praveen. And finally, we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Mohammed Yasir. And he was actually a regular sub until March of 2023, and then was off the team entirely after that, so hasn't appeared since then. So that'll be our last mention of Mohammed Yasir, unless he shows up on the final squad. Let's go back to the top with Laliantuala Changti. So he's been with India since 2015 with 30 caps and 7 goals. So actually one of their highest scoring players. And he was off the team for a while. He returned after a 15-month absence in September of 2022 and started 11 of their remaining 16 games, as well as subbing in for 4, I should say. So just 1 match over that period since he's been back where he was not selected, and has pretty much taken over the position. But we'll do a summary at the end after meeting the next 2 candidates. Udanta Singh is next. He's been with the team since 2016 with 46 caps and 2 goals, and he was part of the Asian Cup squad in 2019. He was a starter, in fact, and has since, or over the past 2 years, started 5 of their 22 games, as well as subbing in for 8 and being on the bench for 3. So he was not selected for 6 matches. However, 2 of the last 3 matches he was not selected for, so a bit of a concern there. So Udanta Singh is coded as both a right winger and a left winger, and he does play both wings, but he is more of a substitute, especially recently, and as mentioned, he missed 2 of the last 3, so a bit of a doubt thrown in there. Finally, we have Rahul Praveen, and he's been with the team since 2022 with 4 caps. He's 23 years old, and he got his first cap in September 2022 and didn't start any of their remaining games, but he was subbed in for 4 and not selected for 12 others. And he would be possible, but unlikely with those numbers, but he did sub in for 2 of the last 3 games. although he wasn't selected for the most recent one. So that bumped him up to possible. Yes, and kind of together with Udanta Singh missing 2 of the last 3 makes us think that he could be making a bid for the basically the backup spot. So let's summarize by looking at the right wing side. So just like the left side, the role seemed unsettled in 2022, again with various out of position players used. Udante Singh came in and seemed to make a bid for the position until Changti came back from his absence, and Changti has occupied it almost solely since then. But we do think Udanta Singh will be the backup for that position. And now we move on to forwards. We include attacking midfielders among the forward line, and we have another definite candidate in Sahal Abdul Samad. Sahal Abdul Samad, and a possible candidate in Brandon Fernandez. And that's all we have actually for attacking midfielders. So let's take a look. Sahal Abdul Samad has been with India since 2019 and has an impressive 33 caps and 5 goals in that time. But he wasn't part of the 2019 Asian Cup squad. He was on the preliminary squad but didn't make the final cut. However, over the past 2 years, he started 14 of their 22 games, as well as subbing in for 5. So just 4 matches that he was not selected for. Sahal Abdul Samad, a definite candidate. The possible candidate is Brandon Fernandez, and he's been on the team since 2019 with 22 caps, and he started 3 of their 22 games over the past 2 years. As well as subbing in for 6 and on the bench for 3. But there were 10 matches that he wasn't selected for, and that includes the last match. So he was a regular sub until missing the 2 tournaments in June. So he missed all 9 matches of those tournaments, and as I mentioned, also missed the most recent match. So I think actually he may be a likely candidate here, Brandon Fernandez, and there was some anger. I just caught an article that said the fans were angry that the manager had snubbed him. I didn't go into too much detail, but I'm guessing that they're talking about him not being called up for those 2 tournaments in June. Anyway, he has appeared since, and we have him as a possible candidate. So basically in the central midfield position, it's always Sahal Abdul Samad, and they do sometimes kind of change the formation around there, but most of the time he's a central attacking midfielder, or in a more defensive formation he comes back into being more of a central midfielder, but he is the starter. We have no players coded as secondary strikers, so we move on to our last category of forwards. And here, of course, we meet the famous Sunil Chhetri as a definite candidate, even though he is 39 years old. And we have a player I mentioned earlier, 2 players at the likely level. The first is Ashik Kurunian. And we also have Liston Kolako, both likely candidates. And we have 2 possible candidates also, Manveer Singh and Rahim Ali. And then 2 players who seem to be off the team. So I'll only mention the one, and that's Lalpakla, JJ Lalpakla, the player we mentioned at the beginning, who's a big loss after retiring from the squad. Last played in the Asian Cup in 2019. So they've managed to do without him, but not that well, as Sunil Chhetri is still a bit too heavily relied upon as the scorer, but what a guy to rely on. He's been with India since 2005 with 144 caps and a stunning goal ratio of 94 goals in that time. So he actually did join Sporting Lisbon's B team in Portugal in 2012 and 13, but that's the only time he's been abroad. He has otherwise stayed in India, and he was part of well, they didn't make it to any cups prior to 2011. He was their highest scorer in World Cup 2010 qualifying, but of course he was a starter in every Asian Cup they've been to in 2011 and in 2019. Kind of interestingly, his mother was a member of the Nepal women's football team. There, just a little piece of trivia. Okay, and then in qualifying here, he got 4 of their 8 goals and was the top scorer for his team, as he usually is. And over the past 2 years, he started 17 of their 22 games. He was injured for 2, the first 2 though, so early on in the period. Subbed in for 1 and not selected for 2 matches. However, a bit of a worry because 2 of the last 3 matches are the ones that he wasn't selected for. So it's hard to imagine them not bringing him, but always a bit of a concern when he's not selected. Nevertheless, we keep Sunil Chhetri as a definite candidate because I think India would erupt if he wasn't brought to the cup. Ashik Kurunivan is the first likely candidate, except there is an injury doubt on him. I'll get to that in a second. Kurunivan has been with India since 2018 and has 34 caps, but only 2 goals, which is pretty low production for a forward. And he was part of the Asian Cup in 2019. He actually started all 3 games also there, and he has started 11 of their 22 games over the last 2 years, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2. And actually there were 4 matches that he wasn't selected for, but the last 2 matches he's been out with a cruciate ligament injury, and he is out until next May, so they say. So that's going to rule him out of the cup. We have to move him down to injured. So that's a bit of a blow, because he is kind of their secondary striker. As we said, he plays on the left attacking midfield role quite a bit too. I think in about half of his starts he played there. So that actually may open up the door a little bit for the other likely candidate, Liston Kolako. Liston Kolako has been with India since 2021 and has 17 caps. And he started 5 of their 22 games over the last 2 years, but he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 9. So just 4 matches that he wasn't selected for. However, like Sunil Chhetri, 2 of those matches were among the last 3 matches. So missing 2 of the last 3 matches, otherwise a regular sub, Liston Kolako. So we still consider him a likely candidate, but a bit of an asterisk at the end there. We'll see if the November games kind of clarify that. The 2 possible candidates, the first is Manveer Singh. So Manveer Singh, I mean, behind Chhetri and along with the player we mentioned, now I can't remember who it was. I think it was Changti, who had 30 caps and 7 goals. Manveer Singh has 36 caps and 6 goals. So behind Chhetri, those are the 2 top scorers. And he's been with the team since 2017, but he wasn't part of the 2019 campaign. He too making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And over the past 2 years, started 7 of their 22 games and subbed in for 2. but he wasn't selected for 13 matches, so more than half of them. And that includes the last match. So you may be starting to wonder, well, who did play in the last match? Because now we have 3 forwards who didn't. Anyway, Manveer Singh, a possible candidate. The other possible candidate is Rahim Ali, and he's been with the team since 2021 with 13 caps. However, the forward has no goals for the team yet. So you can see without Chetri, they'd really be struggling for goals. Rahim Ali started one of the 22 games over the past 2 years, was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 5, and not selected for 10 others, including the last match. So that makes me really wonder who was just. I got to check it out. Okay, I had to pause there and check into it. So it was a bit of a shell game in the last 3 matches there. It was actually Manveer Singh starting the first 2 of the recent matches, and then Chetri coming back for the last one. So they did cover the position. Okay, so let's just finish with a summary of the forwards. And of course, it is Sunil Chetri almost always starting as the centre forward. Kurunian and Kolako replace him when they needed, but in fact, they don't often play alongside of him. They rather occupy roles at the front. So we saw Kurunian as a left attacking midfielder, and I didn't mention that Kolako plays as a central attacking midfielder or secondary striker when he starts. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our look at the candidates and their likelihood. So we're going to come back in part 2 of the mediacast when the squads are released, and go through those players again. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself because I'm supposed to do closing thoughts first. So India, very steady, choosing the same players in the same positions, and the same players being called up. So that makes for a squad that knows each other well, and that seems to be the philosophy going into this tournament. Players familiar with each other and playing in the same positions without too much change. So we have pretty well-defined starters, and in a lot of cases, pretty well-defined backups for each position. And we saw that they've been working on that because in 2022, some of the positions were a bit ill-defined with out-of-position players playing them, but they seem to want to get a starter for those. Anyway, part 2, which will probably come out in late December or early January, we are going to take a look at the list that we just made, and then any notable non-selections. So that would be players we had as likely or definite who didn't make the squad, or any surprise inclusions. That would be players we considered unlikely or off the squad who are actually called back in. Any new players, and there's always a few of these as well, maybe players who look hot in their club play and are brought into the squad at the last minute, and then an update on injuries. But we already have one, Ashik Kurunian, out with a cruciate ligament injury until next May. So we'll update that, but I don't imagine that will change. And any new injuries that come onto the radar closer to the cup. All right, that brings us to the end of the look at the India team. We originally planned to tag on our past, present and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naber Avacham and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this mediacast. The title is called Arabic Trap.